Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Thursday, and this is Seattle Now. The sunlight will soon be scarce here in the Pacific Northwest. As we stand on the edge of winter, COVID cases are rising, and a new level of isolation looms. In remote mountain communities, people pull together in the cold months. But even there, the shift of the seasons feels different this time. In a minute, writer Chris Solomon shares what preparing for winter feels like in his mountain town and how our sense of togetherness is curtailed wherever we live. But first, let's get you caught up. There's no vaccine for COVID yet, but Washington State has a plan for when there is. People at high risk will get first priority. That includes patients in long-term care facilities and essential workers like doctors and nurses. Also, part of the plan, boosting confidence in a vaccine and getting it to communities who don't have good healthcare access. South Lake Union might remain a ghost town for a while longer. Amazon, one of Seattle's largest employers, just extended its work-from-home option through June 2021. It may be the latest company, but it's hardly the first. Apple, Facebook, and Uber have all told their employees the same. Twitter says its workers could choose to stay home forever if they wish. And the University of Washington was just named the 8th best college in the world. Yeah, let's hear it for state schools. UW outranked schools like Cambridge, Yale, and Johns Hopkins to snag that spot, so go Dogs. The third wave of coronavirus is upon us. Washington State is fast approaching 100,000 confirmed cases since the start of the pandemic. A quarter of those cases are right here in King County. We are deep into fall now, and we're all grappling with what darker days will mean for us in this time of social distance. It's a strange time, even for those who've embraced solitude, like Chris Solomon. He's a contributing editor at Outside Magazine, and he's written in the New York Times about the isolation and how it's hitting home in his community in the North Cascades. Chris, thanks a lot for taking the time.
Oh, thanks very much for having me.
All right, tell me where you are. Describe your surroundings, please.
Yeah, so I live over on the eastern shoulder of the North Cascades, kind of the higher, drier country, a little quieter, a little slower pace, a little more agricultural. In Okanagan County, which is, I believe, the biggest county in Washington State. I read at one point it's the size of Connecticut. It's an interesting county because it both, for a while, escaped a lot of the infections that King County, for instance, was facing, but then started to get it a little bit later with a lot of the agricultural workers in the south part of the county. Here we are facing the autumn when infections are on the rise all over the country, including places like this. And we face a really difficult winter no matter where you live.
There's a physical shift that needs to take place where you are. But it feels like for all of us, the mood this week has really shifted. We're experiencing a surge like we talked about in coronavirus cases. The weather has taken a turn. And you wrote this piece about hunkering down for the dark days, and I'm curious how that's showing up for you.
There's a sense of sort of beauty and sadness at the same time. And I felt like that was really sharpened this time of year because there's been so much loss already. And in the summer with the heat and the wildfire, I don't know, you could sort of maybe escape to the high country or you could do other things. But now the shorter days and the coldness and the sense that, wow, we're going to be in smaller spaces now, more confined, generally speaking, and we're not going to be confined with large groups of friends necessarily, maybe a small bubble, maybe just with our immediate family. We thought we knew some isolation in the late spring, and I don't, it occurred to me that, boy, we're really going to head into a long winter here.
Well, and I'm a person who gets up really early, so I notice the change of seasons. I'm an early morning runner. And the end of the year does tend to make me slightly sad, the change of seasons. But in reality, when the light goes away in the city, we don't really lose very much. We just lose the light and the leaves. But where you are, it's much more important to be prepared for the winter. What do you normally have to do to get ready for this time of year?
Yeah, and I don't want to overstate it that I'm some pioneer out there that's canning everything he's going to eat and going out and shooting all his own food. But the place I rent, has a wood burning stove. And so if you're sort of a cheap freelance writer like me, you You don't go buy your cords of wood, you go get your cords of wood with friends and cutting down wood where it's appropriate and bucking the timber and hauling it back and then maybe cutting it some more. And so there's that. And, I was doing burn piles. And so there's just, for someone like me who just really loves to be outside and feels like this time of year, they're ravenous for these experiences of the last of the warm weather, the last of this kind of summer beauty, and wanting to not let it go, trying to spend as much time up with the lovely larch in the mountains, or just this human connection. So like last night, even for instance, we all gathered around the burn pile out in the field back here, and we burned old pallets, that had to be gotten rid of. And we sat around and had summer cocktails, as we're all shivered in the cold. But it was just a chance to be together, spaced, 10 feet apart, and have a sense of connection even as the autumn was closing in. And so all sorts of things trying to get squeezed in as the winter kind of closes in on us.
I think we really are all holding on like never before to those last remnants of summer as we head into the fall and winter. And we in the city make a business of the hygge of this time. But we don't have that feeling right now. It feels like it's like a half impending holiday, half impending doom situation. So how should we be adjusting to this dissonance?
I think one other thing I've noticed is like an explosion of people trying to connect with each other before things get really cold. People want to get together every night this week and just see each other, which I thought was really interesting. I think people sense that the really challenging times to get together are coming fast now with this. There's a forecast for snow Friday on the valley floor. The chance to be inside in a warm place with people, that's a very human thing. And I think the chance to be inside a warm place with a bunch of people, whether it's kind of a dinner party or like a get-together at the community hall, those things are not going to happen this winter. And that's, I feel a sense of loss over that. And I think a lot of people here do as well. Life will go on and hopefully we all stay safe, but a real sense of, underlying sense of melancholy.
Well, Chris, your piece touched a nerve, not just for people here in Washington, but all across the world. I am curious about the reaction and why you think it's resonated to the degree that it has.
And it was interesting to me. I got responses back from people from France to Australia to Florida, and they all were feeling this sense, to badly quote Hemingway, of the end of something. We are also maybe the ending one easier time in the pandemic, ironically, as 30,000 people are dead nationwide. And we're going into an even darker time where I think that the news said yesterday we might have 300,000 people dead by February. And so we're all so exhausted by this damn pandemic. One of the reasons maybe is we want to be back to normal, and we see that we're not going to be back to normal. And in fact, it might get a little worse. Well, it might even get a lot worse before it gets better. And
these could be the good old days, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, summer's still summer. Summer wasn't too bad, and it was actually pretty good for us, where I live. And now that we face the idea that it's going to be pretty crappy before it gets better, I think that's one of the reasons it struck a chord with people. I write about a lot of different topics, and it's really interesting to me that I write about climate change, which affects everyone. I write about some athletic things, which a lot of people do. Nothing I've ever written about has resonated with people the way this did, because I think this just strikes at people's sense of themselves, about community, about isolation, all these things that hit very close to home to how they move through the world every day. And maybe to know that other people are thinking about it too makes them a little less alone, perhaps.
Snow is in the forecast for you, Chris, in the coming days. And in your piece in the New York Times, you called it termination dust. What do you mean when you say that?
It's kind of a phrase people often use in mountain communities, just kind of a cheeky saying, and it means the end of things up high, and usually the end of play, whether it's the end of summer horseback riding or usually the end of things like rock climbing and trail running. It's that first high snow on the mountains that signals, it's time to come lower now and time to shift gears.
It's funny, from my view in Seattle, that means it's almost ski season.
Yeah. So, I mean, termination, the end of one thing is not to get too philosophical, is the beginning of something else.
Chris Solomon is a contributing editor at Outside Magazine. Great to talk to you. Thank you.
Oh, glad to be here.
Seattle Now is produced by Sophie Reed, Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.